Today's video is sponsored by Surfshark VPN, of whom more in a bit. Today we are going off the rails, and I mean that in a very real sense. I thought I'd like to have a brief look at traction engines. I'm working on the basis that if you're watching my channel, you probably have at least a passing interest in trains, and traction engines are kind of train adjacent, if that makes sense. If you're not familiar with these machines, let me give you a brief outline. A traction engine was a steam-powered self-propelled vehicle. They first appeared in the second half of the 19th century and fell out of use in the second half of the 20th. They fulfilled a lot of niches. They hauled loads, they provided power for other machines, and they were used in many industries. These days, there isn't really a direct equivalent, but they survived long enough for literally thousands to make it into preservation. Now, I'm mostly going to concentrate on the history of traction engines in Britain, because this is quite a big subject, and I'm only little. It might be argued, in a sense, that the first steam-powered vehicle was a traction engine, of sorts. It was an engine that provided traction, at least. The first steam-powered road vehicle was invented in France by Nicolas-Joseph Cugnot in 1769. This was designed to haul artillery for the army. Horses were usually used for this, but they had their disadvantages. They scared easily. They needed feeding, which could be difficult in years when there was a bad harvest. And they got tired. Cugnot's tractor was intended to eliminate these problems. It was kind of a success. It worked. It was slow, travelling at 2 miles per hour, and it could only go for 15 minutes at a time before running out of puff and having to pause while steam was raised. It was difficult to steer, and most notably, Monsieur Cugnot did not think to add brakes. This led to what might be termed the first ever car having what might be termed the first ever car crash. And this led to the program being abandoned in 1771. Perhaps the biggest problem was that steam engines in those early days were just too primitive for that kind of work. They were weak and operated at low pressure, like that one guy in the office who never seems to do any work but also never gets fired. It would require a chap across the channel to make self-propelled road vehicles practical. That man was the Cornish engineer Richard Trevithick. Trevithick is most famous for inventing the steam train, but that was a spin-off of his most important invention, the high-pressure steam engine, or as Trevithick termed it, strong steam. Strong steam was a game-changer. It was far more efficient. High-pressure engines could work harder, faster and longer, and required a much smaller engine to do so. They were also, it has to be said, more dangerous and could blow up if safety precautions weren't taken. This led Trevithick's rival, James Watt, to demand that the big Cornishman be hanged, and I'm sure his concerns were purely around safety and nothing to do with the fact that Trevithick's engines threatened Watt's monopoly on steam engines. Trevithick was quick to see the possibilities of his engine, and worked on a whole lot of applications for it. Road vehicles were an early idea he played with. It took some experimentation because at the time neither Trevithick nor his associates were sure if it was even physically possible for a vehicle to drive itself. But they determined it was, and so in 1801 Trevithick built the Puffing Devil. It was a simple vehicle, basically one of his engines on wheels fitted with a crank. But on its test run on Christmas Eve, the Puffing Devil made it up the hill in Camborne, carrying Trevithick and several passengers. This called for a celebration, and so Trevithick and his friends went to the pub. While they were celebrating, the Puffing Devil set fire to the shed it was in, and so was destroyed. I guess Trevithick didn't think to invent the designated driver. Trevithick later built the London steam carriage, a more sophisticated but rather precarious machine that was invented in 1803 and trialled between Paddington and Islington. But it didn't steer well, and Trevithick couldn't interest buyers. Other inventors would make a better go of it, and steam carriages would continue along their own evolutionary path, eventually leading to steam cars. That's a whole other story, perhaps for another video. The traction engine would take a different route. If the pace of industrialization is getting to you, why not do what I did? Just leave it. Get away from it all. Relax. Just you, the sounds of nature, and a broadband connection. But oh no, what if people are trying to monitor you online? Just relax. Today's sponsor, Surfshark VPN, can help you. Shh, 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 it's all right. It's here to protect you. With its advanced encryption, those nasty people on the internet can't hurt you. Maybe you'd like to watch some TV. With Surfshark's servers in over 100 countries, you can get access to streaming services from all over the world. Or perhaps you'd like to engage in some retail therapy. Surfshark lets you access region-specific pricing, so you can get the best possible price, however you choose to treat yourself. And, oh my goodness, it's November! You know what that means! Black Friday sale! Black Friday sale! Click the link in the description below and enter the promo code JAGO to get up to 6 months, yes 6 months, half a year, extra free, complete with 30-day money-back guarantee if you're not completely satisfied, which you totally will be. The sale is running until the 31st of December 2023, but you should click that link now! And relax. Trevithick manufactured engines that he described as semi-portable, that is to say, rather than being pure stationary engines, they were small enough that they could be dismantled and reassembled with relative ease. Other manufacturers would take this further. In 1839, a gentleman named William Tuxford came up with what is normally meant by the term portable engine, a self-contained engine on wheels that could be hauled by a team of horses and used to drive other machinery. And this brought the Industrial Revolution to agriculture, for better or for worse. Steam engines could be used to haul ploughs, to thresh corn, to saw logs, or generally to do just about any job that required simple, repetitive work for long periods of time. Many farmers couldn't afford an engine of their own, so either they would hire machines from specialist contractors, or they would club together in part ownership. The one thing a portable engine couldn't do, though, was move itself, and more than one engineer spotted that it was a bit weird that a machine that could produce many horsepower needed horses to get around. There were various experiments in creating mechanical linkage between the engine and its wheels, but it was Aveling and Porter of Kent who really made a go of it from 1859 onwards. Thomas Aveling is often considered to be the father of the traction engine, although not in the biological sense, can you imagine? Ha! He said of the portable engine, "It is an insult to mechanical science to see half a dozen horses drag along a steam engine." So he built his own. The first traction engines were what were called general-purpose engines. They were driven by a single cylinder and were capable of driving machinery via a belt from their flywheel. The job they were most commonly used for was threshing corn, although they quickly found themselves employed hauling loads, being more powerful than a team of horses. However, despite Aveling's contempt, horses did have a role with the earliest engines. They were needed to steer. Farmers didn't much like this arrangement because it was perceived that steering horses became lazy. Aveling improved on his steering system, and within a decade the modern traction engine could be seen on the farms of Britain. I use modern in a comparative sense here. Portable engines still remained in use due to their simplicity and relative cheapness, but the traction engine would far surpass them in popularity. Once the traction engine was established as a technology, more specialized versions began to be developed. An early spin-off from the traction engine was the steamroller. These became such a part of everyday life that we still use the word steamroller to describe rollers that aren't driven by steam. Flattening road surfaces had previously been performed by men with hammers or horses with rollers. Steam engines, being strong and heavy by nature, were the perfect means to carry this task out. Steamrollers were fearsome machines, and we still talk about steamrolling as a metaphor for something unstoppable. While general-purpose engines were more of a country thing, steamrollers could be seen just about anywhere that had a road. Arguably, the modern motor age wouldn't have been possible without the mighty steamroller. While weight was an advantage to the steamroller, it was a disadvantage off the roads. Engines would get stuck in the mud, and journeys of even a mile or so could take hours. Horses had the advantage when it came to jobs in the field, and so engine manufacturers came up with the ploughing engine. You can tell a ploughing engine by the huge cable drum slung underneath it. The way these worked was this. You'd have a ploughing engine on either side of the field. The plough itself would be attached to the cable. The engines would wind the plough across the field using their cable drums. Once a row had been done, the engines would be moved down a few yards and do the same again. Being huge engines that you needed two of, they were typically owned and operated by ploughing contractors who would be hired by the farmer. They could also be used for jobs like dredging lakes and ponds, substituting the plough for a shovel. With the help of the steamroller, roads were strong enough for the road locomotive or heavy haulage engine. These were huge traction engines designed for long-distance travel. They were typically compound engines, i.e. powered by 2 cylinders rather than 1, and they were fitted with large water tanks. They were faster than your typical traction engine, even though that's not saying much, and they had better protection against the weather, though again, that's not saying much. They were employed in hauling heavy loads, the sort of thing for which a low loader would now be used. During the First World War, many of them found themselves hauling artillery, reminiscent of that first ever steam carriage. Some were fitted with cranes so they could load and unload their own trailers. A rather more glamorous type of road locomotive was the showman's engine. These were used by travelling funfairs, both for hauling everything from town to town and providing power to the rides via a generator. They were typically very ornate, elaborately painted with fancy brasswork and colourful lights. They almost always had names and were popular with children when they steamed into town with a train of caravans and trailers. The early 20th century brought a new type of engine, as a result of some legislation. You see, the traction engine had some powerful opponents. Out in the countryside, there were plenty of wealthy gentlemen who did not like a puffing, steaming, hooting machine frightening their horses. And they were able to put pressure on government to pass the Locomotive Act in 1861. This act, which was amended in subsequent acts, imposed harsh conditions on engines. Among those conditions, they had to be crewed by at least 3 people, plus a man with a red flag walking ahead. They were limited in size, and they were limited in speed. 4 miles per hour on the road, and 2 miles per hour in town. But help came from an unexpected quarter. When motor cars first arrived, they also fell under the Locomotive Acts. Motorists' lobbies campaigned hard for new laws, and in 1903 the government caved. The Motor Car Act removed many of the old restrictions and amended others. What it meant for our purposes was that if one could build a traction engine weighing less than 5 tons, it would be allowed to go faster and could be driven by one man, hence the invention of the light steam tractor. These were, of course, not so powerful as their larger brethren, but they still found plenty of uses, and faster is very much a relative term. 10 miles per hour was a bit of an ask for these machines. While the motor car may have done the traction engine a favour, it would also lead to its end. Internal combustion engines became more powerful and more reliable, and by the 1920s there were lorries and tractors that could not only compete with traction engines but surpass them. They were lighter, faster, and unlike a traction engine, did not require a long time to get steam up. They were also more affordable, so farmers could buy their tractor rather than hire an engine. The traction engine's decline was inevitable, but it was slow. Many owners were reluctant to get rid of these expensive machines, and there were plenty of farmers who were set in their ways. Steam engines were still at work on some farms into the 1970s. Of course, that meant that an awful lot of them survived to be preserved, and you can still see them to this day. The traction engine wasn't as glamorous as some of the machines we associate with the age of steam. It didn't have the prestige of an express train or an ocean liner, but they were a vital intermediate stage between the age of the horse and the age of the motor car, and as such, I think they deserve to be remembered. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video. If so, please do leave a like and consider subscribing for more. This video was going to cover other steam-powered road vehicles like steam cars, lorries, buses and bikes, but the script just kept getting longer and longer, so I think I'm going to make a separate video on those other machines, if that's what you'd like. Thanks also to Surfshark for sponsoring this video. Click on the link in the description below to take advantage of their generous offer. And I will see you all again very soon. Cheerio.